most of our time tonight will be spent more on the older child or the advanced reader. Is kind of how I'll refer to that student or that child. So if we've spent the time doing those pre-reading skills with our littlest ones, if we're engaging our new reader in activities of building words and really getting them to focus in and see the words and realize that there's 3 letters in it and these are the names of the letters, just trying to focus that eye in, start reading or developing some skills with word families, those kinds of things. Once they're getting to a point where there's some sort of fluency there, that maybe you're going to start taking on a small book just to let them independently read through something of this nature, then you're going to start talking about words like fluency. So fluency is referring to how well they read through it. Do they read through it at an appropriate rate? Are they choppy from one word to the next? Do they know how to use their voice, the intonation in their voice, to bring character and life to a story? Do they know how to respond to punctuation? So do they know that when they get to a period, that's a spot where they're supposed to stop and take a breath, or a comma is a pause, or an exclamation is giving excitement or strong feeling, those kinds of things. I want to compare, and this is kind of going to be my text for the night, so to speak, is The Little Mouse, The Red Ripe Strawberry, and The Big Hungry Bear, because I want you to see that even though these 2 books, which probably have about the same amount of text, there's just a significant difference. Overall, story-wise, ability to stay focused on a story like this for several readings. Also, the teaching aspect. So taking a story that looks, if you put these 2 comparably next to each other, you might think that they're about the same level, but there's so much more. They're really not at the same reading level, but at a glance you might think that they are. But there's so much more that we can teach to our older children through this. So, another thing that we're going to talk about is accuracy. So as your child's reading, thinking through, are they skipping words, omitting words? Are they substituting words? So they might, in the early stages, they might very easily substitute the word cat for kitten, because they're looking at picture clues, they're looking at first sounds, both a C and a K are going to say k, that kind of a thing. Substituting words, or maybe even inserting words where they're putting their own prior knowledge of how a sentence would be constructed or how they would normally say something, and they're just kind of filling it all in and making it work in their mind. The thing I'd like to encourage is that I spoke to another parent at the end of our last teaching time, and was just trying to encourage them because they were saying that there's some issues there. My recommendation would be smaller chunks that are accurate versus a chapter full of mistakes. It's much better to sit down and actually just work diligently through a smaller portion than it is to say, well, isn't it more important that they read for 30 minutes? Well, if they're reading for 30 minutes and they're just developing bad habits, then no, that's not what we want to do. And then, of course, at that point, we really want to start working on comprehension that goes beyond the basic sequencing. So it goes beyond what happened first, next, and last in the story. But starting to be able to pull in things where they can make inferences. So they can infer what is going to happen or what has happened, even though it wasn't explicitly explained, or the pictures didn't exactly show you that. So inferring things, drawing connections to their own life. So those conversations that come up out of that, of the character told a lie, and what happened, and how, yeah, that's kind of the way it happened when I told a lie, and it just turned into a bigger mess, and that kind of thing. Also, acknowledging new information. So if you're reading a text that's just opening up their eyes to something brand new, like, wow, I never knew, whatever it is. And then being able to share their opinions about something. When we were reading this story, Puritan Adventure, wow, did that bring conversation. So that was our read aloud, but it still was one of those points where we can take You can see comprehension because you can see that they're understanding what's happening, and then they're sharing their opinion about that. And there was a character in there, both Nate and I really kind of went back and forth again and again, like, whoa, I don't know about this girl. I don't know what she's doing. I don't know if these are good choices. I don't know what to think about this. And we just talked through that. That is comprehension. It's a different level of comprehension. It's not just simply saying this happened. It's taking it to the next level. So we want to do that as our children are continuing to develop up that line. But tonight I want to kind of throw out some different research cases that kind of are the backing for why I'm sort of pushing what I think is a good, easy way of teaching some higher skills to our children through something simple as the Little Mouse, the Red Rice Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear. It says through Harris's study in '62 that formal grammar is less helpful to writers than simply discussing grammatical constructions. Another research was saying that learning punctuation in the context of writing is much more effective. Another one, usage, sentence variety, sentence level punctuation, and spelling are applied more effectively in context of writing rather than in isolation. There's an increase in a student's repertoire for syntactic structures when the stylistic effects are discussed. So again, when you're discussing those devices, which we're going to get into a little bit more. Extensive reading may promote the acquisition of grammatical structures better than explicitly studying them. And the last one kind of says that extensive reading significantly promotes grammatical fluency and a command for the syntax. So lots of wordiness, all to say that if we're sitting here and just having a nice casual conversation and pointing out things, that is better than any worksheet you're going to put in front of your kid. All of those induced activities, all of those things that make you want to not do the activity can be taken away by just taking the time to read a book and be mindful and thinking through, oh, I should just point out, or I should ask him or her, what about this, what about that? So let's dive into that. Oh, and then I want to address, Maren had asked the question ahead of time, knowing what the topic was tonight. She said, well, what do I do with a child who is really reading well and is advancing? How do I keep up? And my quick answer to that, hoping that this really answers her question, is that through the tools that I'm sharing with you, which are just some mindful lists of parts of speech, punctuation rules, and literary elements or literary terms, just having something on hand to help you be mindful is going to help you be a step ahead or be with your children. I don't think we have to get so concerned about whether we are ahead of them so much in our own skills and knowledge, but that there's a willingness and humbleness in our heart that we're willing to walk alongside them. I don't really think this is like, mom has to know it all, but let's just figure this out. So I think as we go through this, even when we apply it to our story today, it will just be one of those great talking points where we can just say, okay, whether you want to go systematic and say we're going to start at the top list and, okay, we're going to talk about nouns for a while, we're going to add in pronouns, we're going to add in this, we're going to grab something from the punctuation list, we're going to grab something from the literary elements list, whatever that might be. Whatever your approach is to what you choose to do can be just as simple as sitting down and saying, okay, there's this thing called a noun. Let's read the definition of what a noun is and look at the example, and now let's see if we can find that in what we read today. It doesn't have to be, I don't think we have to put on the show of mom knows it all, you know, that kind of thing. So hopefully it addresses Marin's question, but she'll let me know a little bit more, should that not be. Simply using the vocabulary is what's really going to be significant for our kids. So, one of the handouts that I gave you, I didn't include it in your folder because it, just a couple of different reasons. I'm not sure that it's that high on the list, but it's worth talking about. But we can point out to our kids that there are about 4 basic forms of writing, whether that's expository, which is talking, it's the kind of writing that's happening because we inform somebody of something. So again, 2 seconds to take with a child and say, is this expository? Do you think this is a form of expository writing? Do you think this is a narrative? And talk about what a narrative is. Do you think this is persuasive? Or do you think this would fall in the category of creative writing? Those kinds of things. Do you have to put a big lesson on for it? No. Just using some of that vocabulary, knowing what some of that is, whether it's simply taking the time to read the definition out loud for yourself and for your child, and saying, what do you think applies to this? There's also 4 basic sentence structures. You can have a declarative sentence. So you could choose a sentence in here and say, okay, now a declarative is a statement of fact, wish, or intent. Again, take a couple minutes to review what it is for yourself and for your child and say, well, do you think we can find that today? Let's be looking for that. Imperative sentences, interrogative, exclamatory sentences, those kinds of things. You can get nitty-picky and you can go into the whole, show me the subject, show me the predicate in this sentence. Is this a simple sentence or a compound sentence or a compound complex sentence? Again, all those definitions are there. I'm not asking you to know it now. I'm not telling you that I'm a whiz at it. The whole thing is just having these conversations with our kids, getting that vocabulary out, and so that we become fluent in it. So that when we're in those upper grades and this is something they really have to know, we're whipping through that stuff. They don't need a big, huge grammar class, lesson, all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and read our story for today, and we're going to dissect it using our little checklist tool. So our story is called The Little Mouse, the Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear. The Little Mouse, the Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear. Hello, Little Mouse. What are you doing? Oh, I see. Are you going to pick that red, ripe strawberry? But, Little Mouse, haven't you heard about the Big Hungry Bear? Oh, how that bear loves red, ripe strawberries. And the Big Hungry Bear can smell a red, ripe strawberry a mile away, especially one that has just been picked. Boom, boom, boom. The bear will tromp through the forest on his big, hungry feet and sniff, sniff, sniff. Find the strawberry. No matter where it is hidden, or who is guarding it, or how it is disguised. Quick! There's only one way in the whole wide world to save a red, ripe strawberry from the Big Hungry Bear. Cut it in 2. Share half with me. And we'll both eat them all up. Yum! Now that's one red, ripe strawberry the Big Hungry Bear will never get. The end. Simple little story. I think we can teach parts of speech out of this. I think we can teach punctuation, and I think we can teach an incredible amount of literary devices or literary terms through this simple little thing. So let's just do that for a quick second. So if we had an older child with us, we would be reading this for the purpose of our younger child, teaching reading skills. We'd be pulling out sight words. We would be, we would be talking about stopping at periods. We'd let them chime in and fill in sentences for us, those kinds of things. They'd hear the story enough, they'd start to memorize some things. But the whole purpose beyond that is to also get our older readers to realize that there's things that you can pull out. So you can be sitting next to your child and you can say, okay, we're going to practice nouns. Let's review what a noun is. A noun is the name of a person, place, or thing. So you can either do something simple like, while I'm reading the story, I'd like you to find a noun, be listening for a noun, and at the end of the story tell me. Or you can pause. If this isn't your first time reading it through, if it's your first time reading through, don't stop and teach a lesson through it. Just let your children enjoy it. Let them see it all pulled together. Let them enjoy it. But if this is your second, third, fourth time reading through, feel free to stop on a page and say, now can you find a noun for me on this page? Especially one that has just been picked. We got a noun there? Person, place, thing?
One is a stand-in for the noun.
Exactly. One is replacing, so it'd be more of your pronoun. It's a substitute for a noun. So a great point for conversation. Does that mean that we can't teach what a noun is? No. But what we can do is we can teach the next definition for a pronoun. It's a substitute for a noun. Quite often we see a pronoun or typically think of it as the he, she kind of stand-in. But just as Amy mentioned, one is replacing it in this case. We can jump down into adjectives. We can find a page that says, and again, you can be intentional about this and say, I want to know that I'm just opening a page and that it's really going to have what I want. You can pre-do that, or you can just go with it and have those opportunities to say, gosh, it doesn't look like there's a noun on this page. No, there isn't, but there is something called a pronoun. You can take the time to talk about your adjectives, your red, ripe on this page. You can talk about your verbs. Are you going to pick that red, ripe strawberry? You can go on and have a conversation about your prepositions. It shows the relationship between a noun and a pronoun or another noun and a pronoun. The examples are the airplane flew above us. So prepositions, above, below, for, from, in, out, to, until. Are you going to pick that red, ripe strawberry?
My 7th grade teacher had a song for us with prepositions.
And what's that?
But I can't remember more than the first. It was to Yankee Doodle.
Okay.
With, on, for, after, at, by, in, against, instead of, near, between. And that's all I got. But I got that
Great.
one.
Well, sing it for us and we'll get the rest of them down and we'll go from there.
But that was pretty good from 7th grade.
Absolutely.
I'm a long ways out from 7th grade.
But it also speaks to your learning style, which also makes us clue into our children and think, well, gosh, what's the likelihood that I have a child that is more of an auditory learner like that and will pick it up through song? Yeah, for sure. So I think we can definitely find plenty of parts of speech. My recommendation would be just check mark what you've taken the time to talk about. Not because you've taken the time to talk about it this week with this story, but at one point, somehow, somewhere in a conversation, you talk to them about nouns. And therefore, you know that, okay, we've done this once, so this is a review. Do you remember? So you can at least ask, do you remember what a noun was? If they don't, not a big deal. Because we're not teaching a lesson where we're asking them to go find 30 nouns on a worksheet when they're done. That's not the point. It's to open up the conversation and start building the vocabulary and the understanding form. I would recommend that one of your reading times through with your older adult, or your older reader, you would pull out a part of speech. Another day when you're reading through, I would ask them to pull out something from punctuation. The punctuation rules are very generic and basic that I have printed for you. I will be emailing out more detailed lists for a lot of these different things. So if you have children that are beyond these and you're ready to talk about more than 3 common uses for a comma, then by all means rip this page out and put your new one in, kind of thing. So it's there as a reminder. But take the time to talk about, there's capital letters. And you can do it from the extent of where you tell them the rule. Well, a capital letter is used at the beginning of a sentence. Can you find that? Or you can do the opposite, and you can say, because you want them to focus in on a capital letter, you can pull your younger child in and say, can you find a capital letter on here? And then you point out to the next child, the older child, now tell sister why that capital letter is there. Have them define the reason for that to happen. So let your younger one identify it, because that's a level that they'll be at. Have your older one name the rule for why it's there. Do the same thing with your period. Do you see a period here? Or do you see any punctuation mark at all at the end? Yes. What is the name of that? What is that for? You have your older child take the time to explain how that changes the way we're reading. So when we're talking about our fluency, that they're understanding and really realizing that we pause. I think, let me find real quick a good example right here. So a use of commas. It says, but, little mouse, haven't you heard about the big hungry bear? So if your child isn't really attaining to punctuation, they're more than likely going to skip that comma after but. They're going to say, but little mouse. They aren't going to take that pause. But, little mouse, haven't you heard about the red, ripe strawberry? Or the big hungry bear, excuse me. So getting our children to really zero in on those different skills. So my recommendation would be one read through, pull out some of that parts of speech. Another read through on another time, pull out some punctuation rules to talk about. This is a good story that uses ellipses marks. Again, not on our list because I did a kind of a real basic one, but that doesn't mean that we can't discuss that. And then this is what I think is just the interesting thing. So if you move to your literary elements or literary terms, it's a pretty detailed list. You're going to find 3 pages, front, back, and then the second page. Your big bold words are definitely words that you can hit on first. I think I chose this list because it categorizes things so that you're a little bit more aware that when we talk about personification, that we're really talking much more, I can't even go back to the style of writing. So it's not referring to the setting or the theme, but your large words are definitely words you're going to want to hit on first. Talk about character, talk about plot, talk about setting. And when you're talking about setting, don't just say, well, where's this taking place? Get into some of those nitty-gritties. What time of day is it? Setting refers to the time of day, refers to the location, all those kinds of things. Hit some of those big topics first and then delve into the more detailed parts of it. So once we talk about who are the characters in the story, the character is the narrator, so there's one of your words that you're going to take time to talk about, and your character is the mouse, and then the unknown character or unseen character is your big hungry bear. So take the time to do that. And all the time that you're having these conversations with your older child, your littler ones, this is just icing on the cake. You're not expecting them to remember that. Really, this is a 2-second conversation with your older child that's meant to help them, advance them. But the bonus is that your younger ones are hearing this all along. So don't be afraid every once in a while to turn to your younger child, your younger reader, and say, do you remember what the character, what does that mean? That's talking about the people or the animals in the story, that kind of a thing. Yeah, great. So then delve in a little bit farther and talk about the protagonist and the antagonist in your story. And don't be afraid to take the time to just say, let's read the definition of what that is. Talk about your plot. Talk about different techniques like flashback. Not something we've seen in this. But if we move on even to conflict. So most stories have a conflict in order to keep the plot moving along, the interest. So you can take the time to talk about how there's a rising action that's happening. So the rising action in this story would be, any guesses? I'll read your definition. This is the plot usually begins with a problem which the protagonist must meet or solve. During the story, tension is built through a series of complications or incidences in which either help or hinder the protagonist in finding a solution. This is called the rising action. So our rising action is referring to, in this story, something as simple as the fact is someone has scared this little mouse to think he's going to lose his red ripe strawberry. So the rising action is what he's doing. First he's gripping on for dear life, and then he's deciding he better hurry up and pick it and get out of there quick, to just have someone tell him, well, now that it's picked, the big hungry bear is really on your trail, to then him deciding he's got to do whatever he can because he wants to save that. So it's building up more and more. And the next thing that's going to happen is he's going to try to guard it, and he's going to try to hide it, and he's going to try to disguise it, and all these different things. So that's our rising action. And then taking the time to say, well, where's the climax? Where does it stop? Where's that peak in it? I would say this is our peak when he decides to cover it up. And then finally, you've got your falling action. And your falling action definition is, it gives a necessary explanation and ends with resolution. In the sense of the sense of at the end of the story that it's complete. So we get to this point knowing, okay, something's going to happen to the strawberry and the big hungry bear's not going to get it. Something so simple. We could do the same thing with other elements. We can talk about suspense, we can talk about foreshadowing, we can say, I wouldn't do sensationalism. We can definitely talk about the setting or the theme of the story. I found that interesting. Theme. Theme is the underlying meaning of the story, a universal truth, a significant statement the story is making about society, human nature, or the human condition. Did you have a theme for the story? A book's theme must be described in universal terms, not in the terms of the plot. The plot is the way the universal theme is carried out in that particular book. Theme can be applied to the reader's own life or to other literature. And then it reminds us that not every good book has a significant theme. Some books' value lies in the pleasure they give, rather than the message they bring. So would you say that there's a theme to the story? Anyone? Can I say no? There might be a trust thing in there. I think when I think about it, I feel like I have to dig pretty deep to find it. I could say no, it's for pleasure. Is there a teaching point? I think there's a teaching point. Fear. There's this outside force. This little mouse was carrying on his happy-lucky-go day, nothing wrong, and then all of a sudden someone spoke fear into him. There's a good moral value to have a conversation about it. Maybe you could describe that as a theme. I think it's okay to have that kind of a conversation with your child. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Some books, clearly there's a theme to it. You know. I think we can even go into talking about different style. Explaining that the most common device of style is imagery. It's the most frequently used device. It's the appeal to the senses. Does this book use imagery? Does it appeal to our sense of taste, touch, smell, feel? Absolutely. A 2-second conversation. Do you have to go down this whole sheet with your child? Absolutely not. Don't kill your child and do that. Please. Especially don't put my name associated with it. Just a 2-second conversation. If this is something that you're ready to start talking about, bring it on and just have a minute's discussion. Do you think the imagery is used here? Yeah, of course it is, because remember they talk about the red, there's our eyesight. Ripe is talking about like the taste, how it's going to taste. Strawberry, there's a smell. It talks about the bear is going to sniff, sniff, sniff it out. Definitely there's imagery there. Figurative language can be used. Personification gives human traits to an animal, a non-human being, or inanimate object. Does personification happen in this story? For sure. Because does a mouse normally climb a ladder? Cue number 1 right there, clue number 1 right there. No, mice don't climb ladders like that to pick strawberries. Do they talk to people? No, of course not. Again, personification. Wow. Just imagine having a conversation with your 9-year-old, 10-year-old sitting on the couch snuggled up, and they're using those words back. Yeah, Mom, there's definitely personification in that story. And it happened because you gave them 30 worksheets to do it? No. Because there was some fighting, screaming match? No, just because you sat down and enjoyed a good story together and just said, this is what personification means. Did you see that anywhere in the story? Yes, no? Okay, moving on. Simile. I don't think there was a use of simile in here. Onomatopoeia. I just love that word, just because I like to say it. I think it's cool. Onomatopoeia. The use of sound. The use of words that sound like their meaning. So, sure enough, we have the boom, 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 and the sniff, sniff, sniff. Again, read your definition. You're going to see comprehension in your kids, because if you didn't stop on that page, they're going to have to remember back. Did I hear anything like that? Did I hear words used that were trying to indicate or convey a sound? Of course, for sure. Do you then need to spend a bunch of time at the end giving them some sort of comprehension questions? No, right there they were able to respond back through their memory of what they've had or heard from the story. All kinds of things. Point of view. Here we go. Are you ready, Pat? Definition. So I said about this story the other day. I'm not really sure what point of view, because it's pretty unique style. Read through the point of views and let me see if your guess matches my guess, because that's really what it is at this point, is my guess.
It's a tough one, because he's not telling the reader, it's not telling this, they're telling the story, but they're talking to the mouse.
Right, so they're definitely coming in the form of like a narrator.
I think it's first person because the I is the narrator. You know, he says, you have to share the strawberry with me, me is I. I think it's first person.
I think that's what I said before, but it's not a regular.
Yeah, it's not regular.
It's such a different perspective because you are talking to the character, so that makes it hard. So I think we could make something up.
I'm sure we could.
It's fourth.
Dramatic first person.
Sure, for sure. There's probably something even more in depth than my list that would really narrow it down. My best guess, I was going to say it was third person omniscient, because the definition of third person says that it uses he, she, or it, so the author is telling about the characters. Well, maybe that's not it. There's a third person's point of view, and then omniscient says we are told everything about the story, including the thoughts and feelings of all the characters, and even information in the author's mind which no character knows. So because you're the narrator, it's almost putting you in the position of being like the author, writing it. I don't know. And you're one of the characters.
I think the illustrations are more
Telltale?
of a third person than, because the author itself isn't really speaking to anyone except the mouse. But the pictures are telling you what the mouse's feelings are. So it's almost like you're getting third person through the pictures, but the actual narrative doesn't like fit.
And do we have to be freaked out that we don't know exactly the right answer? Does it just bring on some great examples? Is this going to be, I mean, I think this is pretty a unique situation for a children's book that you would run across. Are you going to get a lot of practice with some of those other ones that are a lot easier right away? Sure. You know, this is kind of your unique situation. But it brings up great conversation. And it also just is one of those points of just letting your children know, again, I mean, I'm not sure. We're just going to kind of do our best to learn this along together. And maybe this is a great conversation to bring up with someone a little bit more wiser than we are. You know, maybe you know a literature teacher or a book writer or someone else that might have a greater understanding, and it brings up a great conversation. Plus it brings up a great opportunity for your child to learn how to engage in that kind of conversation with somebody else. Like, how cool is that, to have your child address an adult and say, you know, we were really discussing, are you familiar with this story? And if not, you know, maybe we could talk about it sometime, because I'm just really curious. You know, how cool is that? So there's just so many different things that we can do just through just a simple conversation. I went on to even add in some different things. You know, we can talk about antonyms, homophones, synonyms. When you talk about synonyms, you obviously are going to take a couple minutes to revert back to talking about parts of speech in different ways. there's some poetry terms on there that can help you. One of the stories that I want to go into is called The Song of the Water Boatman, and that's all different kinds of poetry in it too. So there's opportunities to use that also. But let's move on from that to talk about other tools that we can use. So I've put this tool in your hands, hoping that it will be a nice little checklist, just to keep words in front of you that you wouldn't normally be thinking about. But there are other ways to be knowing different literary terms or elements that you could be teaching with your children. So, for an example, I've mentioned homeschoolshare.com. Great resource, full of little pre-printable, I don't know if I'd say lesson plans, more like ideas. Just as I'm giving you in these folders are ideas and suggestions, here are different avenues you can go down. Homeschool Share does the same kind of thing. So I'm going to, and Shannon, if you want to share your 5 in a row, and then let everyone take a glance at those too. Just take, I'll let you take one and pass it on, and everyone can have a packet to look at. So Homeschool Share does a lot of what the 5 in a row. Sure. All right. Just let everyone take a glance at them if you don't mind. Take one or two. Got older and younger. So. Right. So a lot of what I do with my boys kind of was birthed through the notion of the idea from Jane Lambert's 5 in a row. Taking a good piece of literature, spending several days on it, she kind of sticks with 5, and then digging into all the different things that we can teach from that story. So those books are full of, here's a book idea, here's this quick summary of what this book is about or the story's about, and here's some ideas that when you're sitting down and you're reading it through, you're going to, once you kind of get the hang of this, you're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, the story about Ping. Little Doc lives on the Yangtze River in China. Okay, so I could take some time to find the Yangtze River in China with my child. We could talk about where is China? What continent is it on? So many different little aspects. We could go in and we could talk about ducks, lots of different things. But her material is very similar to what you can print off on Homeschool Share. Same kind of concept. So just like the printout that I have for you, it's going to give you a title. It's going to give you a quick little summary. So the one I've got is The Song of the Water Boatman, summary. It's science facts combined with vivid poems about pond life through the seasons. Quick little description of what this book is about. Then it's going to go in and give you all kinds of ideas of what you can do from the story. And what I've done is I've flagged or tagged and highlighted literary elements or concepts. Just to let you know that, again, there are free material out there that are doing the same kinds of things as what we're talking about right now, which is taking a good piece of literature, enjoying it with your children, and just bringing different things to their attention. Pull out. So the example here was from the poem Spring Splashdown. Let's see if I can find it real quick. And in this poem, they're highlighting the use of repetition. So, I think it's not the first one, is it? Here we go. Spring Splashdown. Pack, pack, crack, crackle, fluff, fluff, wiggle, wiggle. Snooze, snooze, mommy calling. Peep, peep, scramble, scramble, hop, hop, teeter, teeter, peek, peek, water sparkling. Deep breath, leaping, leaping, splash down, bobbing, bobbing, heads up, paddle, paddle, mom near, little poem uses repetition, you can use this story with your young reader because you're going to read the first word, peck. They're going to copycat you, echo, peck. You can read your next word, crackle. They're going to read along. Repetition used there to teach different skills. They also go into different poems in here. One is written in the first person, and they bring that to my attention. So that gives me an example that I can feel confident about. Okay, we're going to talk about first person today. We're going to read it right here. Another one is High Dragonfly, and it's a haiku poem. So you can talk about what makes up a haiku, and they're giving you those that information here. Another poem uses the repetition. These kinds of things even do things like what Jean Lambert does in her books. They'll even just highlight some vocabulary, like here's some unusual vocabulary that your children might not be exposed to. Maybe they are everyday words for them, and maybe they're not. Again, just things to help you be thinking. These are not like, if you don't do everything in here, you're the bad parent. This is not it. It's simply a list of ideas of what you can do with this kind of a story. So that gets me into the word bunny trails. So I've mentioned that a couple different times already. I think I would encourage, take the time to follow the bunny trails in the stories. So another one was Where the Buffaloes Begin. Definitely going to read this story with my kids. We're in the middle of reading the Indian book right now. We just read today about a different form of attack, of how they would attack the buffalo and be able to actually capture them and different things. Of course I'm going to go on and I'm going to read another perspective. I'm going to read something else. I can follow that into all different things. I'm probably not going to go from buffaloes into how you paint a house, but maybe there's something in the story that's about painting or how they mixed colors or dyed things with berries. Who knows? In fact, let me just look on here. They talk about, you can bring in social studies concepts and you can talk about the Blackfoot culture, so the particular Indian tribes. You can go into concepts like Lewis and Clark. You can talk about the historical aspect there and how that plays into that. Mapping ideas. They even have a great Bible and character study in here where they talk about some of the main things like qualities, because they use the totem pole. So it talks about learn, and then it gives you a verse. Respect, it gives you a verse. Humility, happiness, love, faith, thankfulness, all kinds of things. In here, it tells us that the genre is a legend. So again, it's prompting us and giving us ideas to have that kind of a conversation with our children. The form of writing, the kind of writing this is a legend, and what makes a legend different from other kinds of stories. One of the styles is it has a visceral writing style. It uses personification. It uses repetition. They give you ideas for PE, play the deer and hunter game. How can you go wrong with that? My boys would love it. They give you art. They talk about the art in here as being realism. Just all kinds of things. It's just a wealth of information of all these different bunny trails that you can go on. So you can spend some time with your children, all your children, maybe you're older, maybe you're younger, based on the different ideas. You can veer off into that.
So what is this called, like, if you get on homeschoolshare.com, what do you put in to find
A book title. You can put the name of a book in there, and if they have it, great. Or you can search on there, just like a Google search. So if I wanted to find a book on Indians, let's say I'm doing a read aloud right now on Indians. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm going to pair my read aloud time with my direct instruction time for my younger one, so that they just play off each other, they just build. That'd be great. So I put in Indians, or I put in Buffalo, I put in something along that line. In whatever kind of topics or titles that they have, these kinds of units already prepared for, they're going to bring it up.
Okay.
And so at level 2. Sure, they do, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that too. So all I did to get these different ones was I just typed in literary terms or literary elements. And then it just brought up all these different books that had brought our attention to different literary terms or elements. So all different kinds of things you can do. But also be mindful that our older children can also be our helpers too. So because we began with my youngest, mouse paint, and there's obviously this element of colors and paint and those kinds of things, I just took some things that I had in my little notebook of activities, which not everyone has, I understand that. But I just put it in front of my older child during one of our times after we finished reading and said, you know, I want you to look through these science experiments, which you could be finding in the same kind of book. Oh, I've got my lap already. You know, do a quick library search of science experiments or something using color. Let your older child look through it and say, you know, I'd like you to do a fun activity with your brother today or your sister today. Why don't you look and see if there's something in here that you guys can do? Put a little tag on it. So Nate tagged a few activities. So I can pre-look through it and say, okay, this makes an explosion. No, we're not doing this activity today. Or, oh yes, this has simple little things that we have around the house. I think this would be good. And allow your older sibling to have those moments of teaching and modeling with the younger and doing some simple little experiment or activity to reinforce. Let this be a bunny trail for the day that you're going to let them do. So you're going to sit down and you're going to continue to build that excitement and that reading desire, and then you're also going to let that just spill off into the rest of their life. Encourage them to take whatever they're reading and learning about, and I don't even really have to encourage it. My kids just do it. They just act it out. They let it become a part of their life. They start exploring it. Because we don't just read about it in one setting and then, moving on. It becomes a part of what we're doing. We talk about it again and again. We think a little bit more into it. We start asking questions. We start going to the library and picking up other library books about that kind of thing. So follow those bunny trails and let your older help your younger and take some of that burden off. Don't feel like this always has to be you. Realize that just as much as your older child can gain wisdom and knowledge and understanding, can continue to grow where they're at just by modeling things, just by being that older child that's having to read through directions carefully in order for this experiment to work right. I mean, what better way to teach? Follow the steps in order, or it's not going to turn out when it's their turn to try to put on an experiment for a younger sibling and it fails. You can get crazy, like I did in my earlier years, and take all those nice little bunny trails and collect them. So when we went through Jane Lambert's book 5 in a Row, she recommended pink. So we just photocopied it, stuck it on the beginning of our folder. And when we went, some of the bunny trails we went into is we took the time to practice our printing. So I dot to dot ping and he'd trace over it. So again, I'm getting to pay attention to the letters, all that kind of stuff. We did a drawing lesson and he drew a duck on his own. We talked about correlation of space. Where is China in comparison to the United States? So globally looking at things. We talked about the word discernment. What does discernment mean? Because this was definitely a story that used, the Ping needed to use discernment. He didn't. To be quite honest, wasn't even really too sure what that word meant before we started this story. Great opportunity for mom to learn just as much as it is for the children to learn. We did counting in numbers. So there were tons of aunts and uncles and cousins and all this stuff in the duck family. So we, here's mom, here's dad, here's Ping, here's the aunts, here's the uncles, here's the cousins, here's the whatever. We did them in different colors. Now let's group them and let's figure out how many there were all together. Start counting by 10, start counting by 5s. All different ideas. This is not Lisa's super creative and this is how she figured it out. No, this is looking at resources that give me ideas. And then eventually you kind of get a feel for that. You're like, oh yeah, that's no big deal. Yeah, my littlest one should be talking about counting. And here's a great story to bring in some counting, or here's a great story to bring in this or that. You can do all different kinds of things. Lentil, it was just an interesting story from that because of my child and my child's interest, and I want to feed that and encourage that. I want to help him go on the bunny trails. We go to the library, we get all the military books we can. We find little printouts that we can get on the computer free for like Veterans Day and whatnot. We talk about north, south, east, and west. We use our blocks and we build our own little town and we draw with chalk. the streets and let them play. So take their story and bring it into their play life. Encourage that. At one point, we did another military kind of story. I don't know if it's in this one. Anyway, had a friend who was a Civil War reenactment guy. He had all the garb, he had the guns, he had all this stuff, and great time to invite a friend over and say, would you just mind sharing that with the kids? We got these great pictures, Jeremy coming over and letting the kids put this coat on and showing where there's an actual bullet hole in it, and just all this really neat stuff. It just feeds that whole following those bunny trails, because we want them to have a love for learning and a love for reading, and realizing that this is the beauty that just bloomed from it. How they're exploring and chasing after things that interest them. Do you have to put together all these kinds of goofy things? No. Child number 2 isn't going to quite get something of this is overachieving mom number 1 kind of thing. More reality is, in my opinion, at this point in my life, is just realizing that I can still do all of these kinds of fun things by just simply, let's go to the library and let's get some books and let's sit down and read them and look at them during quiet time, or just having those conversations, having something prep me or give me some sort of foresight to just think, oh gosh, discernment, what a great vocabulary word, what a great concept to teach through this story. Not that I need to spend the time to put some folder together to write down the word discernment, da-da-da. If you have a child who's very visual, this might be, or kinesthetic even, maybe really might be something if you feel like you want to invest the time in to do, just because when Nate gets rambling on and talking to people about things that he's learned, it doesn't take but 5 minutes and he's pulled this folder out, he's showing and telling and reviewing and all of that, whatever it was. So, other things that I have to send out to you, not because I want to push this or say it's necessary, but just if it's something that you're feeling uncomfortable with, but there are nice little observation, little checklists that you can get that, if you want to know, am I on track? Is my kids on track? About where are we at? Simple little things like talking about the early reader checklist. Do they move their finger left to right, top to bottom? Again, things that we've already talked about during this time, but in a little bit more of an organized checklist format kind of thing. Gets down into your later reader. Are they using visual information to solve words or decode words? Are they using the first sound to make an attempt at decoding it? Different things like that. Things that we've talked about already, but would I ask you to put your child through some sort of arduous little task of, I'm going to evaluate you and do all this stuff? No, maybe again something to just be mindful of if that's something you're feeling uncomfortable with. Any questions for me? I want to wrap up our end of the night just by doing an activity together. But any other questions before I do?
Do you know anything about dyslexia? Anybody? Today, Katana knows, she's 5, almost, she'll be 5 on Thursday. She knows the word all, it's A-L-L. I don't think she's dyslexic, but the word we were reading was fall. This has happened a lot. Like today wouldn't have bothered me if it didn't happen a lot. So I blocked off the F with my thumb and I said, this word is all, A-L-L, and she read it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I uncovered the F,
Mm-hmm.
and she put it on the end. Alf. Like she could not put the F on the beginning. So then I was like, okay, well, let's put the F. And so I did, I was like, fall. So she said fall. She still had the F at the end.
Right.
Is that what dyslexia does to your
I
eyes?
think at 5, that's pretty normal.
Right. Okay.
And it also has to do with how you cued her, because you did the all, so what was stuck in her head first
Was
for
all.
processing was all. Now granted, you were trying to get her to say that, but for you to be concerned, like, oh, she's got this learning problem, and no, not at all.
It happens
Really?
a lot with a lot of combinations of ways that we read things or look at things.
Right.
But it seems like she can get the ones she knows. So
Right, no, I think that probably had much more to do with the fact that you identified the all part to her, so she had that stored
it
in her
just
short
stuck.
term right there. Okay, oh, I gotta hold on to that, now Mama's gonna show me something else. Now what, yeah,
I suspect dyslexia, somebody's 9.5, and I think they have to developmentally
Mhm.
get to a certain point, and certain things are just normal, like backwards things
Oh, right.
are just
Writing
normal
letters
up
backwards
to
and
a
stuff.
certain
Yeah.
age.
Which writing letters backwards is even normal up to almost like 10.
it is.
But I don't tell you that.
Reversals and different things. Absolutely, or the substitution, taking a letter that might look, a B for a D, those kinds of things. Very, very common in those beginning years. And most of us don't really think about it, but if someone put a foreign language in front of us, Chinese, completely different little symbol system, and then asked us to try to figure it out, we just don't really realize how much we really have to train our eye to look at the details. It's not just this and this, but it's this, this, and this put a certain way, flipped it, just crazy little things that we take for granted because it is so natural for
We've
us.
been doing it for 30 years.
Exactly, and we just don't really realize how much we have to help our children really narrow it in, focus it in, and pay attention to. Even though there's a line in a belly, the belly's pointing this way, not this way. Just all kinds of crazy things. Or gosh, the belly's on top now. And if your children don't have a good understanding of spatial words, top, bottom, above, under, beside, those kinds of words, when we're trying to describe letters to them, we're talking another language to them, because if they don't really understand those spatial words in the first place, and then we try to use those spatial words to describe a letter, it's not going to be as easy in the first place. It's just going to add to the confusion. Yeah. Questions?
I have questions, but I'll wait till later.
Are you sure?
Well, they're just general, how you run your.
My day. Well, it's okay to ask.
Well, yeah, no, I was just gonna ask, like, you use this kind of, do you guys, like, for math, do you use a curriculum for math, or do you kind of use the same?
I didn't start a planned curriculum for math till second grade, maybe. It's where there were things that we played around with, but again, depending on your level of those kinds of things, you can do the same kind of thing for math as what we've kind of done here with some language arts kind of concepts. If you have a general idea that a kindergartner should be able to recognize X number of numbers 1 to 10, they should be able to print numbers 1 to 10, they should be able to have one-to-one concepts and understanding, that meaning that when they see 1, they can pair it with 1, and they don't see 3 and call it 1. They clearly can focus in on this is 1, and then when I put another one, now this is a grouping of 2. All those different kinds. You can have a quick little checklist. You can find those kinds of things online.
I was just curious, because my daughter's the same age as your son, she's almost 11 next month, and, like, math is, like, our worst part of the day, so I was just curious if you had a.
Right. Let's talk about that a little bit more. I'll tell you what we do use and why we've made that choice.
And also with your history, and your read aloud, are you correlating?
If I can, not all the time. It just kind of, right now, I want to focus on Max, and I wanted his kickoff to reading to be meaningful for him. So it was kind of like, hey, honey, here's some book titles. What sounds good? He said mouse paint. I said, all right, that's what we're doing. And then because that book lends itself to so many other early concepts and early sight words that would come along, number words, color words, even mouse. Like, I can't get over how many times I've gone to the library to pick out books for this kind of thing and went, there's another mouse story, there's another mouse story, there's another mouse story. You can do that just to build on those sight words. So I've done that for a little while, but having picked up Where the Buffaloes Begin, I think at some point we're going to take a break from maybe something that's really focused on a concept and a skill for Max and do a week worth of just reinforcing our history unit and what we're doing, because my read-along time most generally is following my history. I like to, two birds with one stone as much as possible. And then I think we can do the same thing with our read-aloud. I will have Nate do read-aloud sometimes to Max, reading some of those Thornton W. Burgess books, because there's so much so many science concepts in that. So here's a great reading opportunity for me to even just be listening to Nate read out loud, because a lot of his independent reading time I'm not hearing. So to be sure that he's doing well and his accuracy is working, I can be washing dishes and prepping dinner and those kinds of things and be listening to them while my son's basically teaching a science lesson or a literature lesson to my youngest one, while I'm also hearing my older child read and know where he's at
So sweet.
with his
I
level.
wish my kids got along so well.
But that goes back to
Yeah.
teaching those behaviors that
Yeah.
I really, I totally want to lay it all out there. My kids are just as sinful as any other kid in every one of our families. They are. And so it just takes practice. It just takes practice.
Well, and mine are closer in age too.
And
9.5 and 10.5.
Right, and it's a matter of speaking to their heart. I really have a desire for my kids to love one another and to not be a Cain and Abel or a Jacob and Esau situation, and we talk about that often. I don't want that sort of, rivalry all the time, and that comes down to speaking to their heart. How did you just treat brother right now? Or why are you being so impatient with your brother? Because you want to go do whatever you want to do versus be helpful to him. Are you telling on him or tattling on him right now because you really care about him and you want to protect him from something, or you really want him to be in more trouble? The gamut there is there for talking to our kids about whatever's going on. And so, having our children sit down and read together and do all those different things together doesn't happen. That's why my first thing was saying, the groundwork has to be developing those behaviors and those routines so that they know. Today was a little different for quiet time. I don't normally let my kids snack, but they had an all-out war with the neighbor boys and lots of sword fighting, crazy chaos, all for hours today. They were just crazy. And they physically needed a food recharge, but they also really needed that quiet moment. So I paired snack with quiet time today, which means that they sat on the wood floor, because I wasn't going to have them take snack to carpet, into a bedroom, or to the couch. We don't do that. So, that looked a little bit differently. So it required a little more work today to talk about. Plus, I also reduced that time today just because I knew sitting on the floor was not going to be as comfortable, for a long period of time. You roll with it and you work with it. Any other thoughts? Okay. So, my thought is I would like you to just choose a book and use your little cheat list folder. Read through your story, or partially, if it's a longer story. I totally forgot I even did this kind of stuff, but if they're my own books, I've even written on the back of the book, here's a great thing for teaching addition and counting. Here's a great one for rhyme, bears, hibernation. So maybe I shouldn't put that in the pile because I just gave you ideas. But if that's something you like to choose, you can. So I'd like you to just think about it. Think about your children, where they're at. Think about, okay, this child, here's something I would zero in on. This child, here's something I could zero on. Maybe here's a bunny trail I could go off onto that would encourage one of my children because it's an interest of theirs. Maybe it's a bunny trail that they don't even have a clue about, and I need to sort of spark their curiosity about something. Here's where I could teach for my upper level children some sort of parts of speech or punctuation rules or literary terms or concepts.